Hey, thanks for clicking on my video. Seb Heslow here, and today we are going to be overclocking this MSI 1660 Super for Ethereum mining. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put you guys down here and let's open up MSI Afterburner. I'm gonna move you guys a little bit like that. Alright, so the very first thing I always do is I take the fan speed off of auto and I just put it on 80. I apply that. I listen for the fans of the card to rev up, and then I just start my miner, which I'm gonna be using T-Rex miner today. That's just my personal preference. And as that starts up, I'm gonna be talking about the three things you need to keep in mind when overclocking. So the first thing to keep in mind is overclocking is done at your own risk. You know, we're doing things to these cards that the manufacturer did not intend for us to do. So just keep that in mind. The second thing is that every card is unique. So just because I might find some overclocking numbers here that work really well for me does not mean that those exact same numbers will work for you, even if you do have the exact same version of the exact same card. Just due to the fact that each card is unique, each card is individual. Now, the third thing to keep in mind is that when I overclock, I try to just optimize for getting the highest stable hash rate that I can possibly get. It might be different for you. You might want to try to optimize for sort of hash rate to power consumption efficiency, where you try to get the highest sort of ratio of hash power to power consumption. That's totally up to you, but for me, I optimize for the highest stable hash rate I can get. So just please keep that in mind as we go forward here. Alright, so it seems that our card has started hashing and it is currently at 20.77 megahash per second. So let's see what we can do to push this card higher. So the very first thing I always do is I take the memory clock and I just pull that all the way down and apply that just to see what happens. And it actually seems like that improved our hash rate by quite a bit. So it's at 24.39 megahash now. So I'm just gonna see where it settles with doing this. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we can get even more hash rate by pulling it up rather than pulling it down. But let's just see what happens. Alright guys, so this is a good example of why you should always try to mess with things, because all I did was, as you know, I pulled the memory clock all the way down to negative 502, and our hash rate took a massive jump up from just above 20 megahash to now we're at 31.66 megahash a second. So I mean, I could just leave it at this and be happy, to be honest with you, but let's keep messing with it just to see what we can get. So let's put our memory clock back to 0 and then let that settle back to where it was, and then we'll start pushing the memory clock up instead and we see what that will bring us. Alright, so we're back at just above 20 megahash a second now, so I'm gonna start pushing our memory clock up instead. So what I usually do is I take one big jump on the memory clock and let that settle, see where we're at, and then I take quicker, smaller jumps from there. So I'm gonna start by putting plus 500 on our memory clock, apply that, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so it seems to have settled in at around 22.5-ish megahash a second now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do another somewhat big jump. So from plus 500 to plus 750 on the memory clock. I'm gonna apply that and I'm gonna let this settle in and we see what we get. Basically what I'm looking for now is, can I get a better hash rate going positive on the memory clock than I did going negative on it? And if I can't, I guess we'll have to make a judgment call from there. Alright, so that seems to have settled at around 23.3 megahash a second now, so I'm gonna start doing smaller, quicker jumps of 50. So let's go 800, apply that, and see if we get a crash or anything along those lines. I'm gonna just give it like 15 to 30 seconds. And no, we seem to be all good, so let's try 850, apply that. Yeah, we seem to be all good still, so let's try 900 and apply that. And we seem to be all good still, so I'm gonna try 950, apply that. And we seem to be fine still, so I'm gonna try 1000. Yeah, still fine, so I'm gonna try 1050, and that seems all fine too. So I'm gonna try 1100. Seems to be happy here still, so I'm gonna try 1150. Yeah, still happy here, so I'm gonna try 1200. Yeah, and it seems to be happy still, so I'm gonna try 1250. And it seems happy still, so I'm gonna try 1300. Yeah, no problems yet, so 1350. Yeah, it's happy still, so let's try 1400. Yeah, all good still, so I mean, how high does it go? 1500. Let's go all the way up to 1500 and see what happens. Alright guys, so this seems to have settled now at around 25.8 megahash a second. Now, as you might remember, that is still significantly lower than the 31.5 or so megahash I got from pulling the memory clock all the way down. It's now pulled all the way up, and we're getting, you know, a lower hash rate. But I reckon what I'll do is I'll leave it here at plus 1500, and I'll start tweaking our core clock instead, and just to see what that gives me. And if I still cannot beat that original 31.5 or so megahash a second, I'll just pull the memory clock all the way down again, and we'll take it from there instead. So what I'll start with is I'll start by pulling the core clock all the way down, just to see what that does. So we're at negative 502 on the core clock now, and I'm gonna apply that, and we're gonna see what happens. Yeah, so that doesn't seem to have done very much of anything really. It maybe reduced our power consumption by a couple of watts or so, but I'm gonna set that back to, actually I'm gonna go straight from that to plus 100 instead. So I'm gonna start jumping up on it now, and we'll see what that brings us. So yeah, that didn't really do much of anything either. I'm gonna push it another 150 or so. I'm gonna go 250, which might be, I don't know, might have a crash from that, I don't know. I just want to see what happens really, because that is quite a big jump on the core clock. But also so far I haven't been able to get this card to crash in any way, so yeah, no crash, but also no real effect on anything either. I'm gonna try 500, guys. I know that's a bit crazy. Oh yeah, that was no good. That was definitely no good. We might have to do a hard reboot on that one. Alright, and we're back. So it obviously did not like going that high on the core clock, which does not surprise me at all. I've rebooted everything. I put the core clock back to 0, and we're still plus 1500 on the memory clock. However, you know, I really don't think, I mean, it seems the core clock doesn't do much of anything, and we're still at around like 25.8 megahash a second, which is still nowhere near what we were getting with the memory clock turned all the way down. So I'm more curious about turning the memory clock all the way down again, and then tweaking the core clock and see if we can get an even better result by doing that. So let's just do that. I'm gonna put negative 502 on the memory clock, and I'm gonna apply that, and let's see what we get. Alright, so we've settled in at 31.6 megahash a second now. I'm curious to see what happens if I go still negative on the memory clock, but not as negative. You know, like, is there a sweet spot around negative 300, or is it just the lower the better? So I'm gonna try negative 300, and I'm gonna see, do we get a better or worse result from that? So that's negative 300 on the mem clock, and let's see what happens. Okay guys, so that immediately got a lot worse. We're at 19.94 megahash a second now. I'm gonna try negative 400 and see what that brings us. Yeah, so that's still worse again. We're at 19.59 megahash now. So what I want to do is I want to try negative 500, and let's see if that's any different to negative 502. Yeah, so that is still worse. It's at negative 500 on the memory clock now, and our hash rate is at 19.25. So now let me just pull it down to negative 502, apply that. Alright, so this is interesting. It's not going back up to 31 megahash now, so I'm gonna put it back to 0 on the memory clock, apply that, and then I'm gonna pull it back from 0 to negative 502 and see if that's what you have to do. This is the strangest behavior I've ever encountered overclocking a card, I think. Alright, so it's settled in at 20.77 megahash a second now, so I'm gonna pull the memory clock back down to negative 502 again. Let's see what it gives us. Let's see if it works this time. Alright guys, so yeah, that worked. We're at 31.6 megahash a second again now, so let's just leave it at this and start messing with our core clock now. Alright, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna increase the core clock by like 150 or something, just to see if that has any positive effect at all. So let's try that, and let's see what happens. Yeah, so that didn't do much of anything. If anything, it reduced our hash rate by like 0.02 or something. So what I'm gonna do now instead then is I'm just gonna pull the core clock all the way down as well. I'm gonna apply that, and let's just see what that does. Alright, so that doesn't seem to have done very much of anything again. We're down maybe like 0.1 megahash from what it was at 0 on the core clock. It's also reduced our power consumption by maybe like 4 or 5 watts or something like that. Of course, that's just going off of what the mining software is telling me. Unfortunately, I don't have the rig plugged into my power meter, so I can't give you like an on-the-wall metering of the power consumption. But you know what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna set core clock back to 0, apply that. I'm gonna let it settle back to 31.6-ish megahash, and then we'll just start pulling the power limit down and see what we can get results wise from there. Alright, so we're back at 31.6 megahash a second now, so I'm just gonna start pulling on the power limit. Let's start by going 90% and let's see what happens. According to the software, our power consumption is at 122 watts right now, and let's just see what this does. Alright, so we're still at around 31.6 megahash a second. The software is telling us 115 watts is being drawn right now. So I'm gonna keep pushing this down. Let's go 80% power limit. Apply that, and let's see what happens. Alright, so we're still at around 31.6 megahash a second at 80% power limit. The software is telling us a power consumption of around 104 watts right now. So I'm just gonna keep pushing this power limit down. So I'm gonna do 70% now, apply that, and we'll see what happens. I have a sneaking suspicion that I might be able to go all the way down on the power limit bar, because I've done overclocking videos on both regular 1660 and 1660 Ti as well as this. So go check those videos out if you want to. So link in the description for those videos. But what I found there was I could go all the way down on the power limit without losing out much in terms of hash rate at all. So, you know, I have a sneaking suspicion, as I said, that I might be able to do that same thing on this 1660 Super. However, of course, on those cards, I didn't have that strange behavior of pulling the memory clock all the way down, giving me a massively better hash rate. So this card obviously does function a bit differently to those. But I mean, as we can see now though, power limit at 70%, we're getting 31.56 megahash a second, and it's telling us a power draw of 90 watts now. So let's push it further, let's go 60%, as in 60% on the power limit, and let's see what happens. Alright, so it seems that we actually are starting to take a ever so slight hit on our hash rate now. We're down to 31.34-ish megahash a second now. However, our power consumption is down to just 80 watts as reported by the software. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push the power limit all the way down to 53% now, and I'm gonna see what happens. Alright, so if anything, we actually gained a little bit of hash rate there. We're up to 31.34 megahash a second now, but we're still reporting around 79 watts being drawn, and that's what the software is reporting. You know what, I think I am happy here, and I'm just gonna end the video with these numbers, because we're at power limit 53%, core clock at 0, and then memory clock at negative 502, and we're getting around 31.3 megahash a second at a reported power consumption of 80 watts. Hey, so I was just editing this video and I realized I forgot to mention that, of course, after you've overclocked your card and you're happy with your settings, what you should always do is, you know, just let it run on those settings for, you know, a day, 2 days, a week, and just look for, you know, is it getting the odd rejected share here and there, is it crashing, and then adjust your settings down as applicable to that. And also, do you have a version of this card? If so, please leave your overclocking settings down in the comments, and we could sort of build up a little database of, you know, overclock settings. So that's it. Now back to the rest of the video. So thank you so much for watching, and if you could please give the video one of these, I'd really appreciate it. It really helps out a lot and it means a lot to me. And please subscribe to the channel. I got a lot more, both overclocking and other mining videos coming up real soon. So subscribe to see those. Until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Bye bye. Bye 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 bye.